After 30 days of silence, I followed my wife to her yoga class. She didn't bring a mat, she brought her lover, and he was my blood. The two-story colonial in Richmond's outskirts has stood for 3 generations of Hales. Its oak beams and stone fireplace have witnessed celebrations, funerals, and whispered secrets. Now it bears silent witness to my own unraveling marriage. I inherited Hale Build and Design after cancer. Took Dad 2 years back. 60 employees, a respected name in Virginia construction and projects ranging from custom homes to community centers. Architecture was in my blood before I could walk. Dad made sure of that. At 34, I expected to be building my legacy, not watching my life implode. I met Alyssa Bennett at an industry conference in Norfolk. She represented a boutique PR firm specializing in real estate marketing campaigns. Bold red lipstick, sharp black dress, and eyes that smiled before her mouth. While I discussed load-bearing walls and sustainable materials, she captivated the room with analytics and brand positioning. That night at the hotel bar, she sat beside me uninvited. "You're wasting your talent with traditional marketing." She said no. "Introduction needed. Your designs deserve better storytelling." Within days, my phone lit up with her messages each morning. Breakfast photos, Spotify playlists curated specifically for me, podcast recommendations about architecture and innovation. She pursued with surgical precision, yet somehow made me feel like the hunter. "I want a man who knows who he is," she would say, tucking her dark hair behind her ear. Someone confident enough to let a woman be herself without trying to control her. I thought I was exactly that man. Our relationship accelerated like nothing I'd experienced. Weekend getaways to coastal B&Bs. Spontaneous dinner reservations at places requiring weeks' notice. She developed expensive tastes that somehow seemed endearing. Designer handbags and imported wine became reasonable purchases in her orbit. I justified each extravagance as deserved for someone working so hard. 11 months in, I proposed at a ski resort in Colorado, against a backdrop of snow-covered mountains. Alyssa cried as I knelt. "No one has ever made me feel as safe as you do," she whispered, snowflakes catching in her eyelashes. We married at my mother's farm in early autumn. White tent string lights, 150 guests, and a social media highlight reel that gathered thousands of likes. Patricia, my mother, embraced Alyssa like the daughter she never had. Friends commented we looked straight out of a movie. Perfect, polished, enviable. The prenuptial agreement was her idea, not mine. "I don't want your assets," she insisted one evening over dinner. "I want your heart, not your bank account." The gesture reinforced my belief that I'd found someone genuine in an industry of facades. Our wedding night at Charlottesville's most prestigious hotel should have been the culmination of our fairy tale. The suite featured champagne on ice rose petals scattered across Egyptian cotton sheets and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the twinkling city. I called her Mrs. Hale as I moved to kiss her, riding the high of the perfect day. But Alyssa turned away, her face suddenly mask-like. "My body, my choice," she stated flatly, disappearing into the bathroom. I stood there in my half-unbuttoned shirt, stunned into silence. 20 minutes later, she emerged in full pajamas and climbed into bed with her back to me. "She's just tired," I assured myself, staring at the ceiling. It's been a long day. Our honeymoon to the Maldives was postponed due to a sudden work emergency. Back home, Alyssa grew increasingly distant. Physical contact, even hand-holding, became rare. When I'd place my arm around her while sleeping, she'd silently shift away. Breakfast in bed went untouched. Fresh flowers received polite but emotionless thanks. A weekend trip I planned to the Blue Ridge Mountains was declined due to cramps, then deadlines, then simply not feeling it. I began keeping mental tallies of rejection. 20 days since our wedding night. 25, 28, I stopped counting at 30. "Is everything okay?" I asked one morning over coffee. "You seem distant lately." "Everything's fine," she replied without looking up from her phone. "Don't make something out of nothing." Another evening, I approached more directly. "I miss you. I just want to be close to you." She set down her knife with deliberate slowness, meeting my eyes with an expression I'd never seen before. "I've already told you, don't ask again." The first tangible clue appeared when I was sorting laundry. A receipt from an upscale spa in downtown Richmond fell from her jacket pocket. Strange, since she'd told me she hadn't been to a spa in ages. Later that week, I noticed a short golden brown hair on her desk. Alyssa's hair was jet black. It wasn't mine either. Patterns emerged. She began going to bed before me, taking her phone into the bathroom, during showers, keeping it face down on tables. Small behaviors that seemed innocent in isolation formed a disturbing mosaic when viewed together. Then came the night that shattered the illusion completely. I went downstairs for water around midnight. Her phone left on the kitchen counter lit up with an incoming message. The preview displayed Dylan and the words, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'm counting the minutes." I stood frozen glass halfway to my lips when Alyssa appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Our eyes met, then shifted to her glowing phone between us, illuminating the first crack in our marriage. For both to see Dylan, my younger brother by 3 years, had always been the charismatic Hale. While I inherited Dad's methodical mind and steady hands, Dylan got his easy charm and social fluency. He studied accounting in college, a practical choice that surprised everyone who knew his restless nature. When Dad passed, bringing Dylan into the family business seemed the natural thing to do. He needed stability after a string of failed relationships and short-lived jobs. He just needs direction. Dad had told me during his final weeks, "You can provide that." What I didn't anticipate was how frequently Dylan would insert himself into my personal life after the wedding. He began dropping by our house unannounced, weeknights, weekends, sometimes during dinner hours. What struck me as odd wasn't his presence but Alyssa's lack of surprise. She always seemed prepared for his arrivals even when I wasn't informed. One evening I returned from a contractor meeting to find them cooking together in our kitchen. Dylan was telling some story about our childhood summer camp, and Alyssa was laughing, genuinely laughing, in a way I hadn't witnessed since before our wedding. Her eyes crinkled at the corners, head thrown back slightly. The sound was both familiar and foreign, like hearing a favorite song played in the wrong key. "Looks like you two are having fun," I said, setting down my briefcase. They turned simultaneously. Alyssa's laugh died so abruptly it was as if someone had cut the sound. "Just making some pasta," Dylan said, his smile never faltering. "You know I can't stand takeout 3 days running." More concerning moments accumulated. One afternoon I entered through the garage and caught snippets of hushed conversation from the kitchen. The moment my footsteps sounded on the hardwood, they fell silent. "What's so amusing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Dylan flashed his trademark grin. "Just teasing your wife about her cooking not measuring up to Grandma's standards." Alyssa smiled without meeting my eyes, busying herself with wiping already clean countertops. The following week, a package went missing from our porch. When I reviewed the security camera footage, I saw Dylan's car pulling into our driveway at 2:15 p.m., precisely when I was scheduled for a client presentation downtown. Alyssa greeted him at the door, embracing him for several seconds longer than seemed appropriate for in-laws. Her hand lingered on his back as she ushered him inside. I began noticing how Alyssa guarded her phone. She'd flip it face down when I entered a room or quickly switch apps. One night I borrowed her iPad to check some home insurance documents and discovered her photo gallery had been recently purged, completely empty despite the storage showing nearly full capacity. Late one evening I heard soft laughter from the living room. When I walked in, Alyssa was curled on the couch, hastily tucking her phone into her pocket. "Just watching TikTok." She explained, though her screen had been dark when I entered. Against my better judgment, I installed data recovery software while she was at a client dinner. Among the fragments recovered was a partial image, a shirtless selfie taken from a low angle, clearly showing Dylan's face and our guest bedroom's distinctive cedar paneling in the background. The timestamp 2 weeks after our wedding during my business trip to Seattle. The evidence continued mounting. One night I detected an unfamiliar cologne on Alyssa's nightgown, woody with hints of bergamot. Not my scent, not her usual perfume. "What's that smell?" I asked casually as she climbed into bed. "Lavender candles," she replied without hesitation. "I lit them in here earlier while you were at the office." Our financial situation began changing too. Alyssa suggested opening a joint account for convenience, then weeks later wanted to withdraw her portion for financial independence. She began asking pointed questions about company cash flow, ongoing contracts, and Dylan's equity percentage. One afternoon, I walked into our home office unannounced and caught her scrolling through a document titled Virginia State Property Division Law. She closed the iPad so quickly it nearly slipped from her hands. "Just some research for a client," she explained, though her cheeks flushed. It was Jasmine Cole, my executive assistant for 5 years, who finally verbalized what I'd been avoiding. Smart, perceptive Jasmine had witnessed my father's illness, the company transition, and my whirlwind romance with Alyssa. "Are you okay, Nathan?" she asked during a quiet moment between meetings. "You haven't seemed yourself lately." I forced a smile and made some comment about project stress. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things aren't coincidences, Nathan." The next morning, I decided to arrive at the office earlier than usual to prepare for a federal contract presentation. I pulled into the underground parking garage at 6:15 a.m. and immediately recognized Dylan's Audi already parked in his reserved spot. Shocking for someone who typically strolled in around 9:30 at the earliest. My mind flashed to Alyssa leaving our house at 5:45 that morning. Yoga mat tucked under her arm, explaining she'd started a new morning practice to center herself. Except the yoga studio she mentioned didn't offer classes until 8 a.m. I've always been methodical, a trait my father praised and my brother mocked. But methodology fails when emotions cloud judgment. After weeks of gathering fragments of evidence, I couldn't bear the weight of silent suspicion any longer. That morning in the office parking garage, seeing Dylan's car when he should have been asleep and knowing Alyssa's yoga story was fabricated, something inside me snapped, not in rage but in clarity. I walked back to my car, drove 3 blocks away, and called the one person I trusted completely. "Can you meet for coffee now?" I asked Jasmine when she answered. 30 minutes later, in a corner booth at a cafe we rarely visited. I laid out everything. Alyssa's coldness since our wedding night, Dylan's increased presence, the suspicious phone behavior, the mysterious cologne, the security footage, the recovered photo. Jasmine listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to something harder. When I finished, she leaned forward. "I don't believe in coincidences, Nathan. Especially not with someone who signed a prenup without being asked." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Have you checked the company financials lately? The accounts Dylan oversees." I hadn't. Architecture and construction were my domains. I'd trusted my brother with the numbers. That afternoon, Jasmine accessed the financial records with her administrative credentials and discovered troubling anomalies. Multiple payments labeled external consulting had been authorized to a company called Brightline Solutions based in Delaware, a state known for corporate anonymity. "There's more," Jasmine said, sliding a printout across my desk. "Look who's listed as the coordinator on these invoices." Alyssa's name appeared on several documents, though she'd never been officially contracted by Hale Build and Design. The entries were subtle, easily overlooked in monthly reviews. Pull everything from the last 6 months. I directed every media content fee and consulting charge Dylan approved. The pattern became clear within hours. 9 separate payments, each just under $8,000, conveniently below the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting to me, totaling nearly $120,000 funneled to this phantom company I needed professional help. Through a contractor who'd done security work for us, I contacted Paul Nixon, a former FBI investigator who specialized in civil fraud cases. His services weren't cheap, but my need for certainty outweighed any cost consideration. "I'm not looking to prove my suspicions wrong," I told him during our first meeting. "I'm looking to confirm what I already believe is happening." Nixon nodded. Understanding perfectly, I decided against telling my mother Patricia Hale had always adored Dylan, her youngest, and had embraced Alyssa immediately. Learning of their betrayal would devastate her. And if I was wrong, a possibility that grew more remote by the day, I couldn't bear causing her unnecessary pain. Within 2 weeks, Nixon delivered his first comprehensive report. Alyssa's yoga studio visits were fabrications. Instead, she met Dylan at locations carefully selected to avoid surveillance, a cafe with a no-camera policy, a secluded corner of Maymont Park, a bench overlooking the James River where local joggers rarely ventured. "There's more, guy," Nixon said, sliding a manila envelope across the table at our meeting spot, a hotel bar 30 miles outside Richmond. The photographs inside confirmed my worst fears. Alyssa and Dylan entering a roadside motel at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, not emerging until nearly 1 p.m. Dylan's hand resting possessively on her lower back. Alyssa laughing up at him with unrestrained joy. The most damning Alyssa straddling my brother's lap in his car, parked in the executive section of my own company's parking garage. Nixon included audio files recorded via directional microphone from legal distances. I waited until I was alone in my car parked overlooking the river where my father had taught us both to fish, before pressing play. "He hasn't touched me since the wedding." Alyssa's voice came through my car speakers. "It's almost too easy." Dylan's familiar laugh, the same laugh that had accompanied our childhood adventures, now twisted my stomach into knots. The old man would be disappointed in his golden boy. "Are you kidding? Your father would be impressed. We're just redistributing family assets." More laughter. Her laugh. The one I'd fallen in love with now directed at my brother at my expense. I drove home in silence, my mind curiously empty. At home, I methodically printed every photo, every bank statement, every suspicious text message Nixon had recovered. My eyes remained dry, but my hands trembled violently as I laid out the first printout on my desk. Nixon's investigation continued uncovering the mechanics behind their scheme. Brightline Solutions was registered to a former college roommate of Dylan's, with a history of minor securities violations. The company existed solely as a conduit to siphon money from Hale Build and Design without detection. 9 transfers over 5 months approaching $120,000. Funds that would have financed our next community project. At home, I installed a miniature camera in my office after finding an unfamiliar USB drive in my desk drawer. 3 days later, the camera captured Dylan entering when I was at a client meeting. He went straight to my filing cabinet, extracted a folder, and muttered, "Alyssa said it would be in this drawer." Something inside me, some last vestige of family loyalty, shattered as I watched the footage for the 3rd time. The brother who'd stood beside me at our father's funeral, who'd helped me carry the casket, was now carrying away my company's future in manila folders. I was still processing this revelation when my phone rang. The caller ID showed First Virginia Commercial Bank, our company's primary financial institution. "Mr. Hale, this is Margaret from Account Services. We need to verify a share transfer request for 5% of Hale Build and Design's equity to an entity called Waystone Holdings." The paperwork was submitted by Dylan Hale. After the bank's call, I hung up without confirming anything, my mind racing. This was no longer just marital betrayal. It was corporate theft. I immediately called Robert Kinney, my father's trusted attorney for over 20 years. Within the hour, I was in his downtown office, manila envelope in hand. Robert maintained the same oak desk my father had sat across from countless times. His silver hair and penetrating eyes had intimidated me as a child, but now I found his methodical nature comforting. I spread the evidence before him, financial records, photos, audio transcripts, Nixon's reports, and watched as he examined each piece with surgical precision. After 2 hours of review, he leaned back in his leather chair and removed his reading glasses. "This isn't merely infidelity, Nathan. This is organized fraud." His voice carried the weight of 4 decades in litigation. "We're not filing for divorce, we're filing for annulment on grounds of marriage by fraud." "Annulment?" I asked. "Your marriage was never valid because it was predicated on deception. Meanwhile, we'll file for an emergency injunction blocking any share transfers from Hale Build and Design without board approval." The decisive nature of his plan gave me the first glimmer of control I'd felt in months. We filed with the state court the following morning. The petition included comprehensive financial documentation, infidelity evidence, and detailed accounts of asset manipulation. Nixon provided a damning audio recording of Alyssa speaking to Dylan in his car. "Just a few more weeks, and he'll sign everything over to you for that federal project. It's all coming together." All the while, Alyssa remained oblivious to my knowledge. She continued her performance as the devoted wife, reminding me to take vitamins in the morning, asking about new projects over dinner, even kissing my cheek before bed. Her acting skills were remarkable. Had I not seen the evidence, I might have believed her synthetic affection was genuine. The court date arrived with unsettling speed. Virginia's 14th Civil District courtroom was all polished wood and stale air, presided over by Judge Margaret Redley, known for her unreadable expressions and strict adherence to evidentiary procedure. Alyssa arrived flanked by a slick young attorney with gelled hair and an expensive suit. She wore a conservative navy dress, her dark hair pulled back in a modest bun, the picture of wronged innocence. I hardly recognized this calculated version of the woman I'd married. Her attorney opened aggressively, painting me as controlling and financially abusive. Your Honor, Mr. Hale has subjected my client to a pattern of manipulative behavior and emotional distress. They presented a grainy image of me holding Alyssa's wrist in our kitchen, extracted from our home security footage, and carefully cropped to suggest restraint rather than the affectionate gesture it had been. This is just one example of the controlling behavior she's endured. Her lawyer continued as Alyssa dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. I remained silent throughout their presentation, studying Alyssa's face. Her eyes were glass smooth, revealing nothing but practiced vulnerability. When our turn came, Robert approached the bench unhurriedly. Your Honor, we won't be appealing to emotions today. We'll be relying on data. What followed was methodical devastation. Robert presented first complete financial records showing transfers to the shell company. Next, video footage of Alyssa and Dylan entering and leaving the motel. Then metadata analysis proving the images used against me had been manipulated using software registered to Alyssa's laptop. Dylan's signature on share transfer documents I'd never approved. Finally, the damning audio recording. Just a few more weeks and it's done. With each piece of evidence, Alyssa's composed facade cracked slightly. By the time Robert reached his final exhibit, her hands were visibly trembling. And now, Your Honor, the motivation becomes clear. Robert projected a high-resolution image of Alyssa and Dylan kissing her fingers tangled in his hair. It was followed by a text message exchange recovered from Dylan's cloud backup. Alyssa, he's too busy with his precious blueprints. I want to smear paint across his face. Dylan, patience by summer. His name will only be on the letterhead as a courtesy. Alyssa's attorney jumped to his feet. Objection. These exhibits haven't been properly authenticated. Judge Redley, who had remained impassive throughout, finally spoke. Overruled. The metadata verification was presented in Exhibit C. Within minutes, the judge delivered her ruling: marriage annulled on grounds of fraud, no division of assets required, and financial fraud investigation to be transferred to the commercial division. Alyssa left the courtroom, quickly, head high, but shoulders rigid, surrounded by whispers from the gallery. She never looked back. I remained seated after the room had cleared, feeling neither triumph nor relief, only hollow confirmation. Robert squeezed my shoulder. The share transfer matter needs to be addressed next. We'll finish this. I nodded, knowing the foundation of my life had been irreparably altered, but at least the structure remained mine. The following morning, an anonymous email arrived in the company account from a public IP address. The subject line read, Alyssa and Dylan aren't working alone. Your father's former CFO is involved. They've been planning to oust you since your father was on his deathbed. Victory in court proved fleeting. Just 3 days after the annulment, Robert called with unsettling news. Alyssa has filed a countersuit. He said, his voice tense. She's claiming you coerced her into signing the prenuptial agreement through psychological intimidation and verbal threats. Her legal team submitted what they claimed was evidence: a blurry photograph, allegedly showing me grabbing her arm in our living room, and a series of threatening emails bearing my name with messages like, if you don't sign, you lose everything. This is absurd. I said, I never sent those emails. That's not even how I write. I know, Robert replied, which is why we're already working on dismantling this fabrication. Our counterattack was swift and methodical. The metadata from the emails proved they were all sent from an IP address registered to our home network, but only after Alyssa had moved in. Signature analysis showed significant discrepancies between the email signatures and my verified legal signatures. Most damning, the photograph had been digitally manipulated. Paul Nixon's forensic team identified telltale signs of deep fake technology, with facial features superimposed onto another image. Nixon himself delivered the final nail in this particular coffin records, showing Alyssa had hired a freelancer through a darknet forum specializing in custom image manipulation for legal proceedings. The judge dismissed her lawsuit within hours. With the marriage legally voided and Alyssa's counterclaims evaporated, I turned my attention to the business side. Armed with evidence of embezzlement and fraud, I invoked the emergency clause in our company's operating agreement, a provision my father had insisted upon that allowed for immediate share repurchase if an owner engaged in criminal activity or actions damaging company reputation. Rather than simply removing Dylan's influence, I executed a strategic maneuver he never anticipated. I sold his repurchased shares to our primary competitor Summit RealWorks without warning, effectively ensuring he would never regain a foothold in the company. Simultaneously, we froze all accounts connected to Dylan pending the federal investigation. An executive at Summit later confided that Dylan had approached them months earlier with a proposal to merge Hale Build and Design under conditions that would have given Alyssa controlling interest through offshore shell entities. The puzzle pieces were fitting together with sickening clarity. Within weeks, federal authorities summoned Dylan for questioning regarding money laundering through shell companies and fraudulent corporate tax documentation. The investigation expanded rapidly. I received a text from Jasmine one afternoon that simply read, "Dylan in custody." Federal agents arrested him at the luxury apartment Alyssa leased with company credit. That night, a message from Dylan appeared on my phone. "Bro, I'm sorry, they're going to charge me. It was Alyssa who pushed me into this game." I didn't respond. The word brother had lost all meaning. Meanwhile, Jasmine had been working to trace the anonymous email warning us about my father's former CFO. Her digital forensics traced the email to Arthur Vance, who had retired on health grounds 2 years prior, shortly after my father's death. Nixon traveled to Florida, where Arthur had purchased a beachfront condo with suspicious timing. After initial denials, Arthur broke down under Nixon's methodical questioning. He admitted to helping Alyssa and Dylan design a scheme to seize controlling shares from the beginning, dating back to when my father was on his deathbed. "Your father trusted the wrong son," Arthur told Nixon. "We were just correcting a mistake." In exchange for his cooperation, Arthur provided damning evidence, private emails between Alyssa, Dylan, and himself, detailing each step of their plan to oust me, a video recording of a secret meeting captured through Dylan's laptop webcam, where they discussed giving Nathan a financial scandal if things don't work out, detailed financial projections showing how they plan to divide company assets after forcing me out. Most shocking was the timeline. Their conspiracy had begun during my father's final month of life, while I was splitting time between hospital visits and keeping the company afloat. Robert compiled all new evidence and submitted it to federal prosecutors. The consequences came swiftly. Alyssa faced investigation for financial fraud, document forgery, and criminal defamation. Dylan was indicted for money laundering and corporate financial fraud. Arthur was charged as co-conspirator and financial advisor to the scheme. Alyssa's bank accounts were frozen by court order. She was evicted from her leased apartment when the property management discovered the fraudulent payment source. Local business journals began running stories with headlines like, "Hale Divorce, Uncovering a Corporate Takeover Plot." Throughout the media storm, I maintained complete silence. No press statements, no interviews, no public comments. The only response I authorized was a single line posted to the company website. "Truth illuminates itself. We will continue building, from the ruins with real stone." Jasmine and I printed physical copies of every file, every piece of evidence, every legal document connected to the case. We stored them in a fireproof safe in my office, not to revisit, I told her as we locked it, but to never forget. The final piece arrived unexpectedly one evening in late November. I returned to my office after a client meeting to find an unmarked envelope on my desk. Inside was a single handwritten note with one sentence: "She wasn't just unfaithful, she was pregnant, but not with your child." After the federal indictment, Alyssa vanished from media coverage and public view. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight. Profiles, deleted photos, removed online presence, scrubbed clean as if she'd never existed. I matched this erasure in my own life, methodically removing every trace of her wedding photos taken down her belongings, donated even the small tattoo of her name I'd foolishly inked on my chest, covered with an arrow breaking through stone. A permanent reminder that nothing is impenetrable, not even betrayal. Dylan's sentence came down 6 months after his arrest. 3 years of probation, 6 months of financial monitoring, and 800 hours of community service. The punishment seemed light until you considered the invisible sentence. His professional reputation destroyed his name, blacklisted from every business association in the region, his accounting credentials permanently revoked. He sent letters, emails, even attempted to schedule meetings through mutual acquaintances. Each time I declined. His final attempt came on Christmas morning. A handwritten letter slipped under my door explaining how Alyssa had manipulated him, how he'd been weak during a vulnerable time. I didn't need his apologies, I needed boundaries. With the legal matters settled, I turned my attention to rebuilding Hale Build and Design from its foundation. The restructuring was comprehensive. Every staff member who had worked closely with Arthur was let go, regardless of their knowledge of the scheme. Trust once fractured couldn't be patched, only rebuilt with new materials. We pivoted toward projects with purpose beyond profit. 3 new divisions emerged: veterans housing initiatives, community rehabilitation centers, and residential facilities for survivors of domestic violence. These weren't just moral choices. They were strategic ones, securing federal contracts less vulnerable to market fluctuations. Within 18 months, Hale Build and Design broke into the top 20 construction firms in the Southeast for the first time in 3 years. By the 2-year mark, post-scandal, our client retention rate exceeded pre-betrayal levels. Throughout this transformation, Jasmine Cole remained the one constant. While others had scattered during the storm, she had weathered it alongside me, often staying later than required, offering insights I'd missed, challenging my assumptions when necessary. Late-night pizza became our ritual while finalizing proposals. Correcting blueprints until 2 a.m. somehow transformed from exhausting to comforting. The office became a sanctuary rather than a reminder of betrayal. One evening, as we reviewed site plans for a new community center, I finally asked the question that had lingered for months. Why didn't you ever leave? Jasmine looked up from her tablet, a half-smile forming. Because you're not someone who deserves to be left. The simplicity of her answer stripped away the complexity I'd built around relationships. I didn't need love as a void filler or a wound healer. But if something grew organically from mutual respect and shared resilience, perhaps that was worth embracing. The personal rebuilding paralleled the professional. I stopped relying on sleeping pills, began morning runs along the river path, established rhythms that belonged solely to me. I rediscovered my father's journals. His belief that I would carry the flame after him had never wavered, even when mine had. In my redesigned office, I hung only one personal photograph, my father and me standing before the first Hale Build project. Everything else faced forward, not back. I no longer needed to witness Alyssa's downfall or Dylan's regrets to feel vindicated. Their schemes had failed. My foundations had held that knowledge was sufficient. There was no dramatic confrontation, no moral pronouncement, no closing argument. Some stories end not with explosion, but with quiet resilience, the refusal to be destroyed becoming victory enough. They had underestimated what they couldn't take from me myself and what I could build with my own hands. On a rainy evening in April, Jasmine and I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new downtown office, watching raindrops race down the glass. The city lights below blurred into watercolor smudges. She leaned slightly against my shoulder. The contact neither demanded nor avoided. My phone vibrated. The federal court had finalized Alyssa's trial date. Official charges: federal fraud, financial misconduct, falsification of evidence. I glanced at the notification, then powered down the phone entirely. No need to follow it anymore. I think I've finally cleared away the debris. I said more to the rain than to Jasmine. She turned toward me. No, you've rebuilt an entire city. I hadn't been the man they could destroy. I'd become the man they inadvertently created. Now I stood as the architect, not merely of buildings, but of the very ruins of those who had betrayed me.